Let's talk about Georgia. Clearly, the president not pleased with the way voting was handled during the November 3rd election. We know this. He's repeatedly called out Republican Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger on Twitter for overseeing an election that he claims was rigged against him. And Jordan, you've come on the program. You've said that there were issues with the rules surrounding mail-in voting being changed by the courts instead of the legislature. So I'll ask you, looking forward at this point, what steps are being taken to make sure that voting is legal and by the books in the Peach State for these runoff races?
The first step that was taken, and I think this is very key because it'll affect January 5th, which will affect who controls the U.S. Senate, was a lawsuit filed by the RNC, and it was a simple lawsuit in the state of Georgia saying, follow the rules of the state legislature. That's all. Follow the rules that are on the books. Mr. Secretary of State Raffensperger, do what the law says you can do. And he's done a couple of those things. I'll give him credit for that. I think he can go further, but he's finally starting to wake up, and I think that's encouraging to Georgia's conservative and Republican voters because they were pretty discouraged leading into these runoffs. And if they sit on their hands, and I've been saying this, and act like babies that they can't win, the whole country, all of us as conservatives from across the country are going to point the finger at them and say, why didn't you show up to vote? We know there's enough of you to vote. So what has the Secretary of State done? Well, first he announced he is going to have independent auditors checking doing signature verification around the entire state, so not just one county or two counties, and they're going to be done by the University of Georgia forensics team, not just by poll workers trying to figure out if someone's signature matches. So that's good. The second is that he says he's already identified through the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, that's like their FBI, 8,000 requested absentee ballots from people that appear to no longer be eligible Georgia voters, people that have moved, people that have not been there long enough to be a voter. And I think that number should be growing exponentially as we get closer to January 5th. And those, again, the requests may stop, but then you've got to go through. I think the third thing he needs to do is probably audit all of the absentee ballots that come in. There may be millions, but go through and make sure how many of those should be kicked out because they are not Georgia voters or they're not eligible Georgia voters. And he has said, so I think this is a clear message to the left and to anyone thinking they can just go and request a ballot and rent an apartment right now and with a bunch of people and these ideas we heard from the left early on. If you do that in Georgia and they catch you, and you've got now the GBI going after you, you've got the police after you and the state after you with real resources, you're facing a major felony conviction, $100,000 up to $100,000 fine and up to 10 years in prison because of you. That's how serious we take legal voting in America. And I'm glad that Georgia, unfortunately, they did not do this in the general election, but they're moving forward, understanding that the nation's eyes will be on Georgia leading up to January 5th. So is it all going to be perfect yet? It's not there yet, but we are starting to, for the first time, see positive action out of the Georgia Republican state leadership.
Well, we know how important these runoff races are for maintaining the balance of power in the Senate. It's crucial. It's key. It's so important that these elections are done correctly, and then you can ensure that all of these votes are accurately counted and correctly cast, quite frankly, as you say, requesting these absentee ballots, now putting these auditors in place across the state. It's good that this is happening. At least it's happening now. And I think a lot of people who would have voted for the president in the state of Georgia and across the nation tuning in and watching Georgia are wondering, why didn't this happen ahead of the November election? And what was potentially lost because these measures were not put in place?
Think about it this way for everybody watching right now. Joe Biden won Georgia by 12,000 votes. Already, this quickly, leading up to January 5th, when this initiative was launched by the Secretary of State in Georgia, they've identified 8,000 people requesting absentee ballots that are likely invalid requests. And that's just up until now. I mean, I think that will be way over 12,000 likely. So it could have changed the outcome of the Electoral College votes in Georgia. And again, you look at state by state, these rules that were not followed, and how now for runoffs they're starting to actually follow the rules on the books. Yeah, I mean, this could have changed the outcome of the election in Georgia. And if rules were followed, it could have changed the outcome of the election in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan as well.
Which I know is what's inspired you to take sort of the legal steps to try to right these wrongs as you're alleging here. So where are you in that process? We know that if you're bringing any sort of court case, normally that takes some time, and quite frankly, you don't have a lot of time left.
No, so there is a court case pending at the Supreme Court on Pennsylvania. We still have a stay at the Supreme Court on all of the late arriving mail-in ballots. That stay is still in place, so those votes that were able to be set aside, that didn't get mixed up with the other votes, that have not been counted in Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court of the United States put a stay on that. They are not enough votes to overturn the outcome of Pennsylvania, but there is a case again, a case that is similar to what was Texas, not about all of the states, but it could be following a precedent. You could see other states action like this in other states, because where the bar was to that Texas case really was on standing, saying that Texas didn't have a right to sue another state on how they conducted the election. I think that was wrong, but that's where the Supreme Court came down. So what about the campaign? What about President Trump's campaign? Doesn't it have standing to challenge how Pennsylvania conducted its election? And if the court gets to a briefing stage of this, where they ask Pennsylvania to respond, then I think you could see similar lawsuits like this filed in those other 3 states that Texas had sued, but this time coming from the campaign. But again, the Supreme Court is the court of last resort, and in these cases, all of the courts have been very difficult. They have told us, in the beginning, you're filing too early. You got to wait for the harm. Then the harm came, and we filed after we figured it out. And this, again, was not fraud. This was just states not following the laws. And then they told us, well, there's these rules that say if people relied on laws, even if they're bad laws, there's Supreme Court precedent that says we can't really take away their vote. So this was the whole game. This was the whole problem with changing a massive change to our election process, especially a presidential election, general election, with just months before because of COVID as the excuse. And then we have all of these issues. We can't ever allow this to happen again. And I'm talking about as soon as January 5th in those runoffs in Georgia that are going to be so close. And if they are close, at least we want voters to have faith that the right people won, and they won fairly and squarely. Yeah, well, it seems like now finally these checks are going into place in the fact that we're hearing the Secretary of State going ahead and trying to make sure that everything is as legit and secure as possible. So maybe we'll have it all set up and ready to go by the midterms. I know you'll continue to fight to make sure that election integrity continues in future elections at this point, because, January 20th is coming very soon. Jordan Sekulow joining us live here on the program. Jordan, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Take care. Thanks, Emma.
You got it.